When you ask people in a community what they think about electoral reform, and even some former and current politicians, they say you need to change Article 59 or 33 of the Constitution, or that we need to find a way to stop shift jumping by members of parliament, and that to them is the entirety of electoral reform. This faction's position has always been very simple. Checks and balances in the Constitution exist for a reason, and declaring yourself independent from a faction is the right of any member of parliament. What we've historically faced is issues of character, and as we have consistently said, you cannot legislate character. The reality is that electoral reform in any country can already be effected with small steps that yield large results, and it starts with the democratic process of casting your vote. A country's democratic processes are some of its most sacred. These processes, like all others, actually will face challenges by bad actors hoping to erode their integrity. The request to remove the curtain from our voting booths by amending the Kiesbesluit or election decree is something that I've been focused on since even before deciding to enter the political arena. Its redundancy should be obvious to anyone, even me as a first-time voter when I turned 18. The 2 and 3 meter walls provide more than enough privacy to allow voters to be able to cast their vote. But as technology behind mobile phones has rapidly improved, the curtain becomes less of a protective measure and more of a facilitator and an opportunity provider for those who would hijack a democratic process to do just that. Whether by taking a picture of their cast ballot as proof of sale or conducting the infamous Bulgarian train, which is the recurring process of casting pre-filled ballots, the presence of the curtain makes it possible. The appearance of dummy ballots in the cast votes pool is actually in most countries an indication that the Bulgarian train is running. Locally, we have had dummy ballots make appearances in the 2014 and 2020 elections in the votes cast pool, most notably. Today, Madam Chair Lady, I'd just like to remind the public that while we are giving our positions and thoughts on this topic, the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers does not actually need our stamp of approval to move forward with the decision to remove the curtain. If it is the right move for the country and to protect our electoral process, I trust the Prime Minister and the government by extension will see fit to do so. The PFP's faction position on this issue has been made clear in our 2, soon to be 3 letters to the Prime Minister, as the government continues its much talked about trajectory towards electoral reform. So I look forward to hearing from my colleagues on this issue and the discussion to follow. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, my colleague MP Peterson already kind of stated what I was going to say regarding the inclusion of having the polling stations further regulated by El Beham. I was explained, that this is done to allow some flexibility, to allow government to have some flexibility when it comes to making changes because the legislative process can take so long. But of course, MP Peterson went into more of the technicalities of why this was taken out of the hands of Parliament, which I fully agree with, because then you have that incidence of the rats minding the cheese. Further to that, Madam Chair, it is as simple as preventing persons from taking pictures of their cast votes. And I'd like to share a personal experience I had at the 2020 election, my first election as a candidate and as a party leader. I was standing at the Belvedere Community Center, greeting voters as they were walking in, and there was a gentleman walking around with his voter card and his passport in his hand. He approached one of my candidates, and my candidate started talking about the stance of the party, etc. And the gentleman said, I have a bus I gotta fix for $300. I need $300. And I was listening to this exchange between my candidate and this voter, and my candidate said, we don't do that here. The gentleman said, well, then I don't need to talk anymore. Walked off, and he went to a Jeep in which persons representing someone from a faction that is sitting in this parliament currently had a conversation with the gentleman. And the voter went into the Belvedere Community Center with his passport and his voter card in his hand, and he walked out with his cell phone in his hand. And he walked back over to that Jeep, showed them his phone, collected something that he stuffed in his pocket, and then ran off towards the towers in Belvedere. So it really is as simple as taking down the curtain to prevent persons from taking out their phones. At the start of the polling station, it says you're not allowed to be in there with your phone. But we get into the very technical and ticklish discussion if we are trying to take people's phones from them and put them in a box. You're depriving people of their private property. Who is going to mind these phones? These 2 phones right here, except for size, are black. Who's going to say which phone is whose? Who's going to make sure that this is the phone I get back? You cannot frisk persons on their way to vote either, because that is not the definition of free and fair elections. Taking down the curtain does not have anything to do with voter privacy. Their privacy is guaranteed by the walls of the booth. The world over, there is no legislation that I found while preparing this this initiative letter for the Prime Minister that says that a curtain guarantees your privacy. Not one. We have 2-meter or 3-meter walls that are also mentioned in the LBHAM. It's not mentioned that the curtain is there to guarantee privacy because the walls already do that. In fact, observing from outside last election at Milford Hazel, I saw a voter go in, didn't even bother to pull the curtain across. Simply cast his vote and threw the ballot in the thing and walked out. So I really do find it a moot discussion. And then, you know, to perhaps quote Shakespeare a bit, methinks they doth protest too much. Thank you, Madam Chair.